And we're live. Welcome back to another Corona Geek here where we talk all about mobile app development using Corona SDK. I'm your host, Charles McKeever, and today we're going to continue our conversation about shaders. If you didn't catch last week's conversation, you definitely need to do that at coronageek.com, or you can go to youtube.com/coronageek. It's actually the best place to find all the videos that we post. Some of the Hangout stuff and some of the non-Hangout stuff is there as well. But last week we looked at shaders, what they are, why you would use them, what they do, all those types of basics, and we also looked at playgrounds. So if you're not aware, there is actually a playground where you can go and put in shader code and see it in your web browser, which was pretty cool. So leading us through last week's conversation was Stephen Johnson, and he's going to carry us through this next segment. We're going to talk about Vertex shaders, I believe, but I'll let him cover most. What's that?
We're going to try.
We're going to try. Okay. Well, I'll let him cover kind of the technical bits because he is the ninja at this, and I am the novice, and all that. But before we get to the topic for today, let's just go ahead and introduce the panel. Joining us today is Dr. Brian Burton down in Abilene. Hey, Dr. Burton.
Hey.
If you're not familiar with Dr. Burton's work, you can find more information about him at burtonsmediagroup.com. He's got lots of great books over there about Corona and even some YouTube videos on his YouTube channel. So I definitely highly recommend his material. Go check it out. Also joining us is Ed Marina from roaminggamer.com. Hey, Ed.
Hey there. I had to unmute myself.
Yeah. So Ed also has lots of resources over at roaminggamer.com, lots of templates, lots of tutorials, lots of tools and utilities and stuff, so go check that out. Also joining us is Jason Schroeder from jasonschroeder.com. So Jason's got a bunch of utilities that do things like circular, radial timers and color pickers and all that kind of stuff like that. So Jason's got and you're working on something for Twitter, right?
Yeah, I've been working on this will be my first time packaging something as a plugin, which I'm sort of excited about. And it's just going to be a Twitter plugin, so it'll make for really easy. You can log a user into Twitter using a single line of code. You initialize it, just plugging in a couple of bits of info you get from Twitter's dev portal, and then easy access to their full REST API. So a single API call to retrieve the raw JSON data from anything that they support. And then I'm also working on about a half a dozen just sort of convenience APIs that I'm going to build out. So for easier access, you don't have to deal with the raw JSON if you just want to get all the data for a specific Twitter user, get that user's
Uh-oh. Did we lose him? You still there? I think we lost. Yep, I think we lost him.
He's back again.
He's back there. It's interesting how you can be there and not there all at the same time. It's
oh yeah, there's two of me down there. Look at that.
That's how you get all that work done.
I don't know where that cut off. Anyway, I'm working on a plugin to make accessing the Twitter APIs very, very easy.
Well, I tell you what, you are a brave soul because it seems like Facebook and in particular and Twitter keep changing their APIs all the time. So even the guys in the engineers at Corona Labs are always scrambling to keep things up to date because they'll change something and
Well, what I like about this is I'm working on about a half a dozen sort of full-featured, very robust sort of Corona-based APIs that'll return a Lua table or a Corona display object. But I've also built in what I'm calling a flexible query, which so long as Twitter does not drastically change their syntax, should be quote-unquote future-proof, and you can visit their API docs, plug in a combination of data from those, and get raw JSON data from them. We'll see. I've been burned by Facebook in particular in the past, and their whims. But I think this will be useful. I hope it's
okay.
So
well, I'll tell you what. Let's definitely plan to do that on a show and talk about it once you're closer to publishing. I'd like to talk to you about the plugin process.
Yeah.
And also examine what you've built and see how that can benefit people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Also joining us is Kevin from Seaburn Games. Kevin is also working on some interesting things, and he was telling me about before the show. And give us a sneak peek there, Kevin. Tell us what you're telling me.
It's a really simple one line code tracker to track activity within your game or application without signing up to different services.
Okay. Yes. So let's talk about that as well on the show, future show, because we were kind of back and forth about the concept of getting invested in these external services and then having them disappear and how creating something, rolling your own isn't always beneficial, but sometimes can be good to at least get the simple metrics that you want to to be able to get to without having to invest in a larger SDK. So yeah, that'll be a good conversation. Let's do that. Also joining us is Sergey Lerg from SpiralCodeStudio.com. Hey, Sergey.
Hi.
How's it going?
Great.
Gone to any other conferences?
Come again?
Have you been to any other conferences?
No, I've been only to two recently. This one is Mobius and another one is DEF CON. So only two for now, but I'm looking forward to attend to any more.
Okay, cool.
If they have. And right now I'm working on a plugin for Corona that can read QR codes. Yay!
Yay! Yeah, I know that there was a period there where we announced that plugins were going to be accepted and people could go and fill out the form and raise their hand and say they wanted to do plugins. And it seemed like I know, Sergey, you were asking because you had submitted several different ideas, and now that's being moved forward. So someone is actively communicating with those who have raised their hand and trying to help them get set up and all that kind of stuff. And really it just comes down to getting the store to a point where people can publish. So right now it's just sort of a very manual process, and it's going to be mainly free plugins, but inroads are being made to where it'll eventually be paid plugins and stuff like that as well. So it's good to see that kind of progress moving forward. So if you are in the zone for tutorials and tips and things like that, you definitely need to follow Sergey at SpiralCodeStudio.com. He's got some great stuff there. And like I said before, also leading today's conversation, Stephen Johnson. And Stephen, say the name of your studio again.
Chivalba Studios.
Okay, and we will have a link in the show notes to that, so you can go check it out. What do you guys develop primarily there?
I'll show a link here. Does that pop up?
Yeah, well, yeah, I see the YouTube link. Yep.
We are making a side-scroller on PS3, 4, Vita, PC, etc. So we do games, but they haven't been mobile games yet.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. And are you interested in the desktop aspects of things for Corona?
Yeah.
I know there's been a lot of interest in that here lately. And did you guys see that there was controller support in, I guess you could call it improved controller support was announced last week?
Yeah, I've seen the demo. It's quite great. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, there was Xbox 360, Xbox One, PS 1, 2, 3, and 4, generic controllers. I think somebody even brought like a Wii U controller. I mean, just all kind of stuff. I think the one caveat there is just that right now it's on Android. So if you're using the Mac simulator, you can build or you can test out Android builds without having to build an app. You can do that in the simulator, if that makes any sense. So that's kind of an interesting piece of functionality, and it's not available on Windows or iOS yet. But I'm told that that's in the works. But it's kind of cool. The demo that's out there is also available. I think we named it Pew Pew or Pew 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 or something like that. There's a link to some source code where you have multiple controllers all connecting, and then the players are all like shooting each other and racking up points, and their names are over the players and stuff like that. So if you haven't already, we'll put a link in the show notes. You can go check that out. But it might be a nice piece of source code to just sort of pick through to see controller support and multiple player interaction. So. Okay, well, I don't want to talk on too long. That's about 10 minutes into the show, and I think we've got our announcements. Anybody in particular got any kind of announcements that they want to share? I'll open it up one more moment here for anybody who wants to announce anything. No? Ed's shaking his head. No? Hey, we got Greg Pugh joining us from GP Animations. Hey, Greg. Okay, well, I'll tell you what. Let's go ahead and get into today's topic then. Let's talk about Vertex shaders. So Stephen, tell us what was important about last week's conversation, and what do we need to know for this week?
Okay, so in general, a shader is a program that manipulates some graphical element. It's a programmatic way of producing some piece of your image. So a fragment shader will, given, say, a texture position and a texture, you can put together a color at a given pixel. And usually it'll be something simple, but you can go complex. We also showed the playground, which is a way that you can make fragment shaders in Corona. Or not in Corona. You can test them in your browser, and they're almost ready to go in Corona. A vertex shader takes a vertex, which is your position, texture coordinates, color, and something called vertex user data. So it's the pieces of your geometry, essentially. If you have a rect from display new rect, it's the 4 corners. If you have a circle, it's a bunch of little points that approximate the circle. What other shapes are there? Polygon, it's the endpoints. And then you can do something to them. So the default vertex shader leaves them unchanged. Now, but I have got an example that I will show.
So last week we were saying that you could manipulate pixels, right? So that you could programmatically create an effect. Then you could have the fragment, which you were saying was you're taking a texture and then doing something to it, and then the vertex is a step up from that. Is that what we're saying? Now we're full on doing something with shaders.
Right. You don't strictly speaking need a texture or a fragment, but in the end you get a pixel. A vertex shader takes the content coordinates of a display object, and it lets you do something with those. If you do nothing, they just pass through unchanged. But you can move the points around. You can move the texture coordinates. You can slide those. I believe those are the only parameters that are exposed to you in Corona. Those 4.
Okay.
And I think the simulator doesn't really show up as a window, right?
Well, yeah. If you're trying to share, you've got you can either share your whole desktop or you can share a particular window.
I'll do that.
But don't forget to hide your
Yeah, go ahead and hide your browsers. That way,
hide your browser before you share your window. But then it's hard to do because
Sorry.
you're doing both at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, this program feels like it's missing some fast toggle between. Are you seeing this?
Yeah, we see some text.
A wavy line of text? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
So this is an example of a vertex shader. I started with, this doesn't show very well, but can you see that at all?
It looks like a white text on a white background.
Okay, it is. So this, what object do you think this is under the hood?
New text object?
Rectangle.
Any other guesses?
Snapshot.
Okay. This is a new polygon.
Huh.
So I'm taking, and I can show this without fill. So it's just a polygon.
It's a rectangle.
It is. It's a rectangular polygon. And the reason I do that is because that lets me make a bunch of points, which are a bunch of vertices. So there's 20 on the top and 20 on the bottom. Okay?
Okay.
And I use an typical paint with an effect. And this is the effect. It's a vertex. It has a vertex shader. It's dependent on time, so that's how we get the wave. When we set is time dependent in our kernel, we'll get this value filled in, Corona total time. That's a measure of the seconds that have passed in the program. So it's an input that's changing every frame. And we can feed it to functions like here, sine. I have x. We'll go ahead and x. Okay, x. In the vertex shader, you can also get the texture coordinates. So they'll, in a normal object like a rect, which doesn't have any frames or any.
Can you visualize all the vertices?
You want to see them? All right.
Yeah, I definitely think that would help to know where they're being, because you're saying there's 20 on the top and 20 on the bottom. It'd be good to know what they look like.
Let's see what I can do.
Can you make us some balloon animals?
Yeah, oops. I cannot make you any balloon animals. I do not have any balloons. That's not very.
So are these 20 points? Are they along the I don't know if that's the right term, but they're on the outside of the.
They're all on the top and all on the bottom.
Okay, so they're okay.
On the top, I used a sine function to displace some of them, so they're evenly spaced from left to right.
Gotcha.
So every so often there's another point, and it forms the rim of the polygon.
These are basically stripes, right? Vertical stripes.
Right. Well, what do you mean by stripes?
Well, narrow rectangles from top to bottom. Columns.
Yes, the relevant point is that you have a bunch of points, because if you only have 4, actually I'll show you.
Yeah, well, I think what Sergey may be asking is, are those 20 points along the very top of the rectangle and the other 20 points are along the very bottom of the rectangle, or are they a series of rows?
There are 20 going from left to right, and it goes down here, and 20 right to left. So here we go from left to right, just x, and increment by 30 pixels each time. And we go backwards on the bottom.
Okay.
So far, so good. Now, those get passed. Each of those 40 points gets passed to the vertex shader, more or less simultaneously. So some of them might be processing at the same time, because they don't depend on one another, the vertices. So the graphics card it doesn't need to worry about them clashing with each other, so it can do several at once. And this parallelism is what makes shaders fast. That's why you can do a whole screen of pixels with a program on H1, for example. So
okay.
We take the sine using the time and our left to right position, and this gives us some value. We scale it and add it to the position. The position is what we get from the vertex, and that moves it up and down. And as a result, we get this. We already have the texture on just from the normal fill mechanics.
So let me make sure that I'm clear on what we're doing. So I thought I saw a moment ago that there was a wavy text
Yes.
filter that you could apply. Was that a built-in?
No, we are defining that here.
And so here we are really creating the wavy text effect using the shaders.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's a category which is filter, generator, or composite. And I don't know if those enforce anything yet, but I imagine they will in the future, because I think I've gotten one to work with another accidentally. You can put them into a group. Right now, if you don't specify a group, it puts them into something called custom. But as more and more people write shaders, I imagine everybody will grab their own namespace, and then so people can share without clashing. And then we give it a name.
To what objects can you apply Vertex shader? Like polygon and what else?
Basically any display object. You just have to have an idea of what the vertices look like.
So if I apply to polygon, I have how many polygons I have defined in the polygon. But if I apply to a rectangle, I only have 4 of them, right?
Right.
And if I apply to a circle?
Who knows? But it's some number of points approximating the shape.
So this is essentially identical to what's built into the SDK, which is every display object has a path table, but that only gives you 4 vertices. But this is the ability to create as many vertices as you want, placed wherever you want.
That's why I use the polygon. With a rect, I don't know how well I could show it. The thing with the rect is that it'll only be moving 4 points, so you won't be seeing the interior part waving up and down.
Okay.
You'll just be seeing the 2 edges. So it's not terribly exciting. But
so rects aren't as malleable as a polygon.
Right. So
that's interesting, actually.
Well, and that makes sense, right? Because it's almost like it's a predefined primitive shape, whereas a polygon can have, however many points you want, and you can manipulate those points.
Oh, you know what? I think I might have missed this. So I got you. So when you're creating the polygon, you're adding those points. It's not so the points are created before you even deal with the shader.
Right.
Okay, I was thinking you were taking a polygon that only had 4 vertices and using the shader. Okay, gotcha.
So this one is a polygon with 4 vertices. It's a rect, and as you see, it's pretty stiff.
Yeah.
So that works to give you some sort of motion, waving motion, but it doesn't give you like if you were going to do a flag or something like that, you wouldn't get the same effect.
Can you set your display mode to hybrid so we actually can see the points?
Oh, that'd be cool.
Let's see.
Does hybrid display mode do that for polygons? I didn't know that.
I think so.
We're about to find out.
Because I thought it was just a physics thing, but maybe I'm wrong.
And what's the name of it?
It is only a physics thing.
Oh, is it?
Oh, but you know what? If you applied a body to that, we might be able to see it.
Oh man, I didn't have any of this prepared.
Welcome to Ed's world.
It's going to start falling down if I don't.
Can you put some bright pixels at the texture coordinates where the vertices are?
You guys are horrible. Here, would you please just plug in my custom thing that I want you to do?
What?
I'm gonna paste some code to the console in a second. Just give me a second. I'll paste it for you. Okay.
This is like the nightmare Google interview scenario where they stick you in front of a whiteboard and give you a pen.
I'm trying to think of how I would do this now. I suppose I could.
Well, this is the part of the show where the audience learns that everybody here is human. And nobody has any of this stuff built into their brain automatically.
And now we know somebody's ringtone. So I just pasted some stuff into the message console there. And then let me give you one more bit.
That was a completely appropriate ringtone, too. It was kind of like circus music, wasn't it? There's somebody juggling.
It was me, but it wasn't the ringtone.
Let's see. Well, okay, so I could make... I'm trying to think of the easiest way to do the color to accentuate the points. And I'd have to write a pixel shader that would... I tried to find where the values are closest to multiples of 1/20, and it's going to be a mess.
I'm going to give you a hint. This is what I always say when I get stuck and people ask me silly things. And I mean, really good ideas on the show. Notice how I changed that. Tell them, that's a great idea. I tell you what, I will release a demo later with that.
Sure.
That's what I'm leaning towards.
Or that's an exercise for the reader.
Or yeah, my other great that's an exercise. Listener.
Yeah. So so if that's going to derail things, let's not worry about that. But let's look at the rest of the example to see what's going on. Because now we at least have the idea that we can take and create a shader that's applying a wavy text effect onto this pre-made object, which I'm assuming is like that image that you created, and it's because it was white text on a white background, and we're looking at an example that's red text on a black background. I'm assuming at some point we're going to apply some other effects to it to get to that point. So we definitely want to see how that works.
I got a question for you too, Steve. When you're
Yeah.
ready for more random questions.
Sure.
Are you okay? So now you're showing us examples where we apply a shader and it runs forever.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't done a lot of shader stuff, and so I can't remember. Is it straightforward to remove a shader subsequently to adding one, or to pause a shader? Have you ever had to do that?
A pause only matters if it uses time.
Okay.
You might just pass in your own time variable too.
Right. I'm assuming that in this example we're using time.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I think you can just remove it by object.fill.effect equals nil.
Nil. Mm-mm.
Or you can assign a new one.
So did I understand that if what you're saying is you would just go in and change the value of your time? Is that how you would pause it?
Sounds like you would remove the shader entirely. Pausing it, I don't think you can because it's precompiled, right?
Well, okay. This is the Corona total time is something we didn't get to last time. It's what's called a uniform, and a uniform, it's basically another word for global. It's shader global, or graphics library global, basically. So Corona is updating a few of these things. There's the total time. There's the delta time, which I have not found a good use for yet. It's the lapse since the last frame. So it's assigned globally at the beginning of the frame or somewhere in the frame, and it's updated each time. There's actually some caveats associated with this, because if you look on the reference card that I posted last time, there's some things about precision. If you have a low-end device, in the fragment shader, you might only be able to get so many values, up to 1024 or something, until problems start. So if you're using time, that can overflow very quickly. That's only about 17 minutes or something along those lines. On a high-end device, it's more like 20 hours. But if you're multiplying by things, that also becomes a problem because you can very quickly get into those high numbers. I think, Sergey, you had some problems with noise doing this where it got choppy.
Right.
This is what it'll do. It'll put one number on one side and one number on the other, and then it'll try to blend between them. And there'll be this abrupt jump in values, so you'll get kind of walls in your images. But that was sort of a tangent.
And so when you talk about, just make sure we're clear there for anybody who doesn't know, when you're talking about noise, what do you mean by noise?
Noise is coherent randomness, reproducible coherent randomness. So it's usually a value between -1 and 1. And it takes some sort of input that usually a continuous input. So say a position. A position won't change very much between this point and the next point. And ditto if you have 2D or 3D positions, you can go in any direction and they'll stay near each other. So if you pass in inputs that are near one another, they'll give you random numbers that are near one another. And what that lets you do is it avoids things that look too nice. So say if you had something moving along a line, in real life, most things don't move perfectly smoothly along a line. They'll kind of veer along it. So for example, you could use noise to add a little displacement as you go.
Okay, so sort of give it a more organic feel as opposed to a mechanical.
Right, and I'll show. Let me see if this one is. It's not working. I have some playground examples where that's. Of course, it's not working right now as I test it.
That's okay. Well, before we get too far away from that, though, did we want to go back to the example that we were looking at with the polygon? And was there anything there that you needed to cover?
Nothing comes to mind on my end. If anyone else has any questions about it.
How did you get the red text when you had the white text with a white background? So how did that?
Well, the red text is just. Sorry. The screen share thing is.
It's a little wonky.
That is just a fill color. So, or no, I guess my apologies. In this case, I'm just using the UV. So, from
Try the wireframe mode that we just posted to the comments.
While you do that too, I'm just going to plant a question in your head, and you may not know, and that's okay. When you're adjusting the size and/or placement of an image using a shader, how does that impact certain properties on it? So, for example, height or content height. If these things are being manipulated by your shader, is that going to impact those properties? If you're trying to gather how many pixels high or wide your image is that going to be updated in real time, or is that still just reflecting? That's so weird to see yourself. Or is that just going to reflect the actual size?
Well, you're only working with what begin as content coordinates. There are, I just mentioned uniforms a second ago. That reminds me of a couple others. There's.
Oh, I'm sorry if I missed that. I had to step away for a couple of minutes. So.
Okay, so there's these things called uniforms, which are basically they're Corona, or they're not Corona-wide, but they're globals for the shader system. And time is an example of one of them. It's updated every frame, but every shader sees the same time value. There are others called Corona texel size, and it's a number that is the value of one pixel, basically.
Mm-hmm.
There's a screen version and a content version. So if you need to respect the screen size or the content size, you can use those to step 1 pixel away. Otherwise, you'll just be using the approximation it gives you. Does that answer any of it? Or?
I'm not entirely sure, but it's okay. And I feel bad too that you're revisiting stuff that you talked about when I had to walk away. Don't hold the class up for me.
Well, I didn't cover that, so.
Okay.
Okay, so you just looking at the example that you've got up here on the screen, you are creating a shader. You created points on top and bottom. You are manipulating those points. Then, because it's an image, a PNG, you are changing the fill on that. And then what else? What else is happening there?
Well, usually there's a function called Corona color scale that you would apply at the end. That will use the fill color.
Okay.
I wasn't using it in that example. I was just taking the texture coordinate from left to right. That's why you get the red going from black to red as you go across the screen to the right.
Okay, so that's how you created the gradient effect with a texture fill.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Let's see if I could cover a different use of vertex shaders if we want to go into that.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions about what we've looked at so far?
Well, I want to try the wireframe thing that we found. That Seaburn. What's your name? I forgot.
Yeah, Kevin. Yeah, Kevin put it into the chat.
To the comments. To the chat, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so just copy and paste that out, I guess. So he's basically what he's doing is just setting the draw mode to wireframe. So Kevin, have you used this on other projects before?
Let me unmute the mic. Yeah, I have used it, but it's in most cases not really useful because it just shows a box with vertical line. But because we have all these points, we will probably see a load of lines moving about. So I just thought it might be very interesting to actually see.
So maybe we wouldn't see the points themselves, but we would see...
No, but you can see the lines from the points.
Gotcha.
Hopefully.
Yeah, which would give us a reverse representation. You know, this reminds me when I was a kid. You know, you play with BASIC, and you would that's what all you would do is you would just sit there and experiment. You know, what happens if I do this?
That's so cool to
Oh,
watch.
wow.
Yeah, that looks like a spirogram. One of those spiral games, you know, where you draw the line.
Yeah, but now you can see all the lines from the points. So that's, yeah.
So how come it looks like it's one line is coming from the lower right-hand corner, and then all the others extend from that?
Well, this isn't the way I thought it was represented, actually. This looks like a
this is how your polygon is subdivided under the hood.
It looks like
and this is not the most efficient way, and I thought it would be stripes, but vertical stripes, but these are not vertical stripes. This is something really different.
It looks to me like it's kind of working as an STL 3D file where you build out of triangles. So you always need to have 3 points to create a shape.
Yeah.
Yeah, this looks like a fan, a triangle fan, which is one of the DL modes for rendering a primitive.
Well, okay. So why? Maybe we don't know the answer to this, but you can see what I'm seeing is that in the lower right-hand corner, it seems like the points extend from there, but then in the upper left-hand corner, it seems like it's skewed just to the right a little bit. I wonder why that is.
No, I don't know.
I would think they would be symmetrical on both sides.
I wonder how it. How can we manage the?
Where was your first point?
Say,
Yeah, how can we manipulate it?
yeah, how can we manipulate it with the vertices that you provided to the polygon?
It's either the upper. It might be the upper left or else the one over. Let's see. Because I might have stepped. Yeah. No, I don't.
Did you carry the one? Is that what happened? You carried the one.
Looks like I said.
You could write a custom shader that draws points at the points of the vertices, so we could see what's really going on.
Not now. Not now.
Not right now. Come on.
So
the reader.
What we've learned today, though, is that wireframe is a really cool way to visualize what's going on with the shaders here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gives you a clue as you might have made a mistake. Not so much a mistake, but you didn't do what you thought you were doing. Perhaps.
Yeah. I mean, when people draw pictures, artists draw pictures, they flip the picture back and forth, just so that they can see it differently and know that they're getting the effect that they want, and they're constantly doing that, drawing a little bit, flipping it back and forth, and making sure the balance is there and all that stuff like that. And yeah, why not visualize what you're actually trying to do to make sure you're getting what you want?
Yeah.
Okay, well that's a nice little nugget. Okay, so did you say you had some other examples? I mean, we want to.
Yes, I'm going to show noise first.
I think we're through beating you with that example. Can we do another one?
Okay. So this, let's see here. This is a kind of a cutaway, or not a cutaway, a cutout. Where I draw a line over something and I use it to stencil out those pixels. It's another mask. I've got all kinds of masks now. And this is using noise. So it would normally be something like this. But since I've applied noise to it, I've varied the height up a bit. And
so I'm assuming frequency is applying some sort of waveform, whatever, to the.
You can go back and forth between these.
That's cool.
And that.
So right now it's doing just a black. Is that what it's supposed to do? Just a black.
Black or with a background image. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay, I gotcha. Now you can. Gotcha. So what? Okay, that's cool.
That's an example of noise.
Right.
It's not a Vertex shader thing. It's just.
What is just on the fly here? Is anybody in the panel? I mean, could you see a practical application for something like that? Like what would you do? Like this one would be a cool microscope sort of thing, right? Like a.
Yeah, these are other types of noise.
Like there'd be all kinds of applications for something like this in games specifically.
Yeah, it seems like there's a technical aspects of it, and then there's the creative aspects of it, right? Coming up with a story.
Just figuring out how it fits into your story, and then taking advantage of this. Because with this, you very quickly, not very quickly. The development times may be a little bit longer, but the demand on your processing time is going to be very low, and not put a lot of demand on the mobile device that you're deploying this to. Which that's the huge advantage of all of the shaders.
Well, Stephen, go back to the one, the spheres there, where you had the it looked like the sun. Sorry, I know you just killed your screen share.
Sure.
So there's spheres, and then that one. It looks like the sun, right? So, I mean, let's say you are doing a cutscene or something that involves flying to the sun, or flying into the sun, or you're going to launch yourself around the sun, or whatever that storyline is.
You've got a game with magic in it. Here's a great fireball.
I've been thinking of using it as a fireball. This is called fractional Brownian motion.
You mix that with some particle effects behind it to add just like a halo effect to it or something. It's awesome.
Yes. And the demand on the phone is going to be very small, and you're going to get a much more realistic or live impact from that special effect, rather than just using a static PNG file to shoot across there.
Well, and because I'm assuming that the variable element in these, you're using time probably to create some of the movement in these. Is that correct, Stephen?
And I think all of them, or almost all of them. Some of them I might be updating outside.
But if you were to do something a little more dynamic, so let's say that sphere was a physics body, and rather than time, you're using its linear velocity to impact that. So the faster it's going, the faster the motion happens on it. When it's not moving. I think there could be lots of cool things you could do with that.
Right, and you can feed all of these in through Vertex user data. You have 4 of them, and so you can run out pretty quickly. You do have to be a bit judicious about how you allocate them. I have mentioned that if you can manage it, you can also use a texture as input, just of numbers, and then you have as many as you need. But it may be difficult to put your information in a form that you can read out of a texture.
Also, just thinking about practical applications for these sorts of things, I thought the RIP demo that you had there was awful cool. I mean, I just downloaded over the weekend Forever Lost 3, which is a Corona-made very successful game series, and it's sort of a 2D point-and-click adventure. And that's the kind of thing that I think in the first scene in that game, there's something with like a wallpaper that comes off. And this is not knocking them at all. Their presentation is beautiful in that, but you tap it and the thing comes off. But this is an opportunity to take something that is ultimately 2D and give more of a sense of if you're ripping it. So as you're dragging your finger, some of that, it reveals what's underneath it. I think there's lots of cool applications that these are relatively simple things that once I say that having not really mastered them, but I think once you have, they're a great way for low amount of work, big amount of impact in terms of visual presentation.
Well, yeah. I mean, everything that Stephen showed so far has been. It may be conceptually intensive and math, intensive, but the block of code, it usually isn't that long, so it's almost like snippets. So yeah, if you can have a snippet part of your toolbox, then your ability to step up the game, so to speak, of your game seems to be, the potential is there. I mean, you can really step it up.
It all seems like every 8 months to a year in the forums, there's somebody who wants to create a lottery scratch-off ticket, lottery scratch-off ticket effect. And I'm looking at this is a way to get some, by using noise, by having it randomized, it creates this very realistic. It's like you said, it's if it's too straight, if it's too linear, it doesn't look real.
Right.
And this is a way to sort of achieve that without having to manually somehow create the effect. It's like, no, just randomize it, right?
Steven, have you tried all of these shaders on a device?
I think so. Everything that's in this project that I'm looking at right now, I have fairly recently. There were some that would. It's been maybe a few weeks since I've tried them, so there might have been some things that have broken since then. But on my cheap Android, some of the noise do break down. Although I've been looking at some others that don't get such large numbers. So you might have to hunt around for some of these things, but.
Let me ask you, since you kind of mentioned that, do you find yourself having a least common denominator device? Is there a device that you go to that you say, hey, if it'll run on this, it'll run on any other device?
I don't have enough to really establish that. I have one that doesn't have high precision fragment shaders, so.
So within your own personal collection of devices, you have one that you go to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and you mentioned snippets. I've got these functions, loader.fragmentShader and loader vertex shader, that will look through the code. The code is just a string, right? So you can use the Lua string utilities to search through it, and that also lets you do things like build your code, generate your code dynamically if you need to hard code some constants in, that sort of thing. But I go in and look for some of these functions, like simplex and stuff, that I've defined in a library. And what it will do is string them together so that I can build things out of snippets. Okay, so we got that, and it'll build this fragment. So.
Oh, okay. So it's outputting it as a so you can see everything that's all been combined.
Right. So I've got a sphere utility, and I've got a noise utility, and it gets to be a huge file if you've got them all in one big lump. So I string them together, but I don't know how well written the GLSL analyzer is. I'm sure there's ways to break it, but it's been helpful.
That's pretty cool. That's a kind of a nice little nugget there.
Yeah.
I like tools that generate tools. That's how the robots, that's how the robot uprising starts.
Right. So I'm gonna cover a couple of these. I have two shaders. This one has 4 parameters. You can specify the top, the right, the left, and the bottom. And it lets you peel away an image from the center until it's complete, or until it's a point, whichever way you go. So I have this, and I have this that lets you expose a bunch of points, right? And let's see, this one just uses a bunch of sine waves and checks whether the current texture coordinate is within the bounds defined at whatever height and width it's at. If it's not, just emits a clear pixel. Otherwise, emit the texture. And these these aren't using a noise function, but they use enough sine waves to look like noise. And this one takes some input, so some integer, or it doesn't have to be an integer, just some number, and it randomly chooses a bunch of points using fairly cheap rand. This is kind of like what the built-in Lua rand uses. It's just a multiply then a mod, and it doesn't have great properties, but it spaces these points out enough. And if they're within a distance, it draws the pixel. If they're within a distance of any of those points, it draws the pixel. Otherwise, it's just another clear pixel, as I said. So the reason I bring those up is because these assume that we have a coordinate system that goes from 0 to 1 and 0 to 1, right? Which will be true if all we're doing is using an image. but we might be using an image sheet. And then we're at some arbitrary frame. And suddenly we don't have from 0 to 1, 0 to 1 anymore. We have, from 0.2 to 0.3 and whatever. So using some tricks like centering it at 0.5 aren't going to work. They're just going to give garbage. So we need some way to tell the shader I'm centered here. And in the vertex shader, we get the positions of the corners, or we get the positions of the texture coordinates around. And there's not a lot of support for the texture coordinates, but because there's nothing in Corona that will give you the 0 to 1 coordinates for a frame of an image sheet. You have to synthesize it yourself from the image sheet data, and not very convenient. But if you have a position for the center of the frame where you put your display object, then in the vertex shader you can say, oh, this is the corner I have. Where is the center relative to the corner, to the vertex in the corner? If the x is greater, we can say, oh, the texture coordinate is 1. If it's less, we can say it's 0. And ditto for vertically. Does this?
So you're sort of dynamically calculating the edges of your image based on the center point, and
yeah, we're making an equivalent from scratch.
Gotcha.
So, and I'll quickly show. I did briefly cover that, or I at least looked at it in the last show, but I didn't get a chance to explain what was going on. Mm. So here in the wait. Okay. So in the vertex shader, this step function, what it does is it takes a value, and if the other value you give it is less than the first value, it returns 0. If it's greater than or equal to the value, it returns 1, which is exactly what we need, because we want a 0 to 1 coordinate system. And I think I briefly covered this last week too, that if you pass in a 2-element input, you can also pass those into these functions, and they'll give you 2 elements back. So they'll call it for each element. So we get our 0, 1 coordinates in the vertex shader. And then we feed them into what's called a varying, as opposed to a uniform. And a varying will get interpolated between our vertices and passed into the fragment shader in that interpolated form. So does that make sense?
So basically in our shader, we're sort of dynamically getting the size of the shader itself. Am I missing an understanding?
Well, so I evaluated the center at some point.
Yeah.
Right? And I passed the center in through the x and y. And using that, then I can get texture coordinate system around me, or you shouldn't really think of it as textures anymore, I guess, but just values between 0 and 1.
Okay.
0 on the left or the bottom, 1 at the top right.
And that becomes most advantageous to us when we're doing what?
These would be for if we have image sheets or anything with a frame where we don't have just one image, where we have images that could be anywhere in the texture.
Gotcha. Okay, gotcha. So non-uniform size images that are in an image sheet, and then we're using shaders to manipulate them in some way. And so now we need to kind of flip through and figure out, well, what's the size of this this image so that we can apply the shader correctly to it.
Yeah, and I don't know how much time we want to go to, but I'll show something really quick that uses these two that I just showed you.
Okay.
So this is lots of programmer art. I have a switch here that I can use to make a maze. So if I click on it, you'll see the maze use that unfurl effect to spread out, where I was feathering the edges away. And then I can do this, and it'll go away as points. It'll gradually widen and shrink as points.
So you're applying an effect to a portion of the puzzle.
Right, and it's built on tile sets, so I have to make an image sheet version.
Okay,
So
yeah.
That's how I discovered this problem.
Okay, so yeah, so you were trying to do that exact thing and you didn't have a solution for it, so you had to come up with something.
Exactly.
That's cool. No, I like that. Well, that's good. I think that's I think that's a good stopping place in the conversation. Does anybody on the panel have any questions? It's a lot to chew on. It's definitely a lot to chew on, and we've already covered last time that that shaders are a big topic, and the books that Stephen has are heavy-duty books. He's looking for one right now. Yeah, look at that. I mean, that's a
Speedy Gonzalez impression there. I'm not sure what that was.
that is a good chunk of a tree there for sure.
And they're all like that.
I will ask one question. Is there a decent resource for the Corona specific? I'm thinking of, for example, the function that if you wanted to honor coloring, for example, you have to add in this Corona specific. Is there a good resource for what functions that are specific to Corona that we should put in our shaders?
I don't have the link handy, but it was it's custom shader effects or custom graphics effects.
Okay.
There's a little page.
Was it like it's like on their page somewhere?
Yeah.
A Google search could find it then probably.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've included the shader effects in my books, but not the Vertex that we were talking about today.
Right. I think they don't want to include it in the playground probably because then they have to account for being able to expand the window and probably things like that. I assume.
But Jason, are you asking about the built-in
just specifically. Like I know last week we talked about there was a web page that you gave a link to, which gave sort of a handy reference for GL syntax and what have you. And I'm thinking specifically there was there's the one I can't think of the name of it. You put it at the end of a lot of your shaders, so that it'll honor set fill color, for example.
Color scale.
And I'm wondering if there's a half a dozen, however many.
There's not too many.
Okay.
So you're looking for sort of a cheat sheet to say, okay, there's a bunch of different shader things you can do with shaders, but things that work specifically with Corona would be.
Well, that's it, because you can do a Google search and find. Because that's going to be the harder thing to find, I think. I mean, there are dozens and dozens, if not hundreds and hundreds of websites out there that'll give you pointers on writing GL shaders. But, I don't think there are that many that's going to give you that stuff that is specific to using it in Corona.
Right.
Okay, well, maybe that's something we can get Stephen to write.
Get more to do.
Just a shortcut guide, just a little, just some of the things that he commonly uses. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. We'll see. Well, okay. Well, I think that's good. Do you guys want to talk more about this next week, or what do you want to talk about? Something different? What do you want to talk about? Do we have any suggestions? Ed's eyes are glazing over there. Or he's putting on mascara. I'm not sure which one.
More shaders.
More shaders. Sergey says more shaders. Ed, what are you giving me the stink eye for? What's that?
I'm not giving you any stink eye.
I'm just
Well, I
messing
was
with
going to talk about mascara. I'm crying. I have a question for Steven. Stephen, all the stuff you showed us last week and this week, did you share a link? I'm looking for a link to the code, or are we going to get our hands on that?
I haven't assembled it all together in one place.
Okay.
That's
'Cause
the
I would
thing.
I'd like to be able to look at it, but I'm assuming that you're going to want to share some kind of package. Do you need a place to put it?
No,
Place
I
to
just
share
need to put it together.
Okay.
Or to list a bunch of links, I guess. I have a bunch of gists and some big projects.
Yeah, I'm thinking a consolidated single download would be easiest, but whatever's easiest for you, right? So.
By the way, I
Just
looked
was
at
the best one.
the link you gave to that YouTube video. Militant looks cool.
Thank you.
I'm gonna for sure get that one for my Vita when it comes out.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes to that as well. Okay, well, I think what we'll do is we'll leave it there, and maybe offline, Jason and Kevin, we can talk about maybe getting you guys on to talk about what you're working on, and then I know that I have recently I purchased a Surface 3, and I wanted to kind of work out the workflow for creating art assets on the device. So draw something and then be able to iterate quickly through my development, and that led me to wanting to create sprite sheets, and I needed a good way to do that, and I didn't want to necessarily buy Photoshop and things like that, so I learned how to do it in GIMP. So basically I can create layers, create sort of the animation pieces, and then spit out an image sheet at the end that I can then use in my project to iterate through pretty quickly. So maybe at some point we'll talk about that as well. So we've got a few topics that we can kind of mix it up with, and then maybe get some guest interviews on and stuff. But if you guys have suggestions between now and then, let me know. One other thing I want to note before we head out of here is one that we did have some audio issues with the clips from last week. So if you watch the Hangout entirely, or if you go back and rewatch the Hangout, that audio is fine. But when we created clips of the Hangout, for some reason the audio didn't come out on some of them, or it didn't start, like a minute into it, or whatever. So, I'm going to go through and re-edit those clips and re-upload them. So I apologize for the technical issues there, but I don't know why it occurred, but we'll fix it. So just know that. And then the other thing is that for July we were going to play Rise, which is by Novateur, which is Vernon Coleman, and so you can at novateur.com you can find his thing. We'll also put a link in the show notes, but it's available on iOS and Android. So it's another one-touch game that is gonna ruin your life. So so be prepared for that. We're gonna play that for July for a chance to win a $50 gift card, and as always, just share a screenshot of your high score at facebook.com/CoronaGeek, and then at the end of the month, I think on the beginning of August, we will announce the winner. So, all right. Well, thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back here next Monday at 12 p.m. Pacific to talk all about mobile app development using Corona SDK. Until then, have a great week and happy coding.
Adios.